I'll bring this meeting to order, and we'll begin roll call.
Senator Driscoll.
Here.
Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Larson.
Here.
Senator Smith.
Here.
And Chairman Salzar.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. So the first bill up is the recalibration, House Bill 316, and some great staff here. Please take it away.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tanya Heitrick, Legislative Service Office, Operations Administrator. You have before you House Bill 316, School Finance Model Recalibration -2. This bill comes to you from Management Council, and it establishes a select committee on school finance recalibration to be comprised of 12 members, 6 from each house, with those appointed from the House from the Speaker and those on the Senate side by the President, not later than March 31st of 2025. It also requires that 1 member from each House be appointed by the minority political party. It requires the Speaker and the President to appoint co-chairmen for this effort, and it charges this committee with recalibrating the education resource block grant model that's required pursuant to Wyoming Statute 21-13-309T. It also requires that the committee study any necessary recommendations in response to the district court decision. As you are aware, we are currently involved in school finance litigation. The evidence in that case closed October 25th, and we are awaiting a decision by the district court. It's possible that decision would be appealed to the Supreme Court if it follows the prior school finance cases. It authorizes the select committee to sponsor legislation, and it mandates state agencies, school districts, and the School Data Advisory Committee provide necessary data and information to LSO for purposes of conducting this work. And of interest to this committee is that it appropriates $920,000 to LSO, both for the professional consulting expertise as well as the expenses of the committee itself. It was inquired just before the meeting how many meeting days are generally utilized for this effort. It is 12 meeting days, so 6 two-day meetings is generally what it takes to undertake this work. And subject to your questions, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Great, thank you. Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Smith.
Yeah, I got a question on, you said that on that close to $1 million, how much of that is private consulting? And is there a breakdown of that? And just what's the breakdown of the expenditure?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Senator Smith, the fiscal note estimates approximately $120,000 of that would be utilized for the committee expenditures. So that would be for the salaries and per diem of the committee. And then the remaining would be the estimate for the professional consulting expertise, which has been inflated from prior amounts that we're used to under this contracting expertise.
Senator Smith.
Would you break that down a little bit, so where that $800,000 goes for this?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Smith, the decision on where it goes has not been determined. That's up to the decision of Management Council on any selection of a contractor. And so in the past, the legislature has utilized experts in school finance, and most recently in the 2020 recalibration, Picus Auden and Associates was the firm selected, and they've been involved with the 2005, 2010, and 2015 and 2020 recalibrations. In 2017, the legislature also hired Ogden Blake Palak and Associates as well as a separate school finance consultant. But all those are at the directives of Management Council and their approval of contracts. And Ms. Heitrick might have some additional details.
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chairman and Senator. The House Appropriations Committee, the bill as introduced actually contained 2 sections, one for $120,000 and then the remaining $800 in a separate section. But they had a motion that passed to combine those amounts, and the rationale was to not disclose how much was available for the consultants specifically.
Senator Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tamara, Matt. The 6 two-day meetings, does this anticipate redoing the basket of goods or just a basic recalibration?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Driscoll, recalibration is a recosting of the Education Resource Block Grant model. Any review of the basket of goods would be a separate and distinct effort. I would remind the committee that in 2017, you did look at the basket of goods. There were changes made as a result of that. And also the Governor's Right Initiative is also looking at changing the delivery of education. They might come with some recommendations as well. And then lastly, I would point the committee to Wyoming Statute 21-9-101 and 21-9-102. Those are the statutes that contain what is commonly referred to as the basket of goods.
Mr. Chairman, follow. Yeah, I'm aware of the 21-9-101, 102, but I guess to me is the talk at Management Council we did was basket good. Is there anything in play that allows this committee to modify or change the basket of goods, or are they just doing recalibration?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, you could certainly request the consultants cost out other elements. They have done that in the past. The last time they've looked at the lunch programs to determine a cost associated with that. They've also looked at school resource officers. They've looked at virtual education in an off year for us. So certainly if there were elements that the committee was interested in having cost out, your consultants could do that. I would also note that in past recalibrations, your consultants come to you with any sort of novel or different delivery in education. We know on the front of virtual education that has changed since 2020 with COVID. And I'm certain they'll have new recommendations on that front as well. And I should mention this, the Senate Education Committee did make an amendment on page 2, and they struck that language starting with further, and then on to page 3 through line 3 through predictable. So as it stands currently, further the select committee shall study charter school funding in other states and offer suggestions on a funding formula for charter schools that is both equitable and predictable was deleted by the Senate Education Committee.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to keep taking
No,
time trying to figure out. So it appears mainly we're looking at costing on this, not what's there. And is there a way to amend in the bill so we positively can delve into the basket of goods to make appropriate change? You know, if all you're doing is cost now, you say, here's what something costs, if you understand what I'm saying. But you have to decide, school resource officer, whatever it is. But it makes it really hard to change much in the basket of goods if all you're doing is placing costs. To me, it seems that first you decide what's in the basket of goods and then you decide what the costs are, not backwards. And maybe I don't understand what I'm trying to say.
So, Mr. Chairman and Senator Driscoll, the Management Council discussed this thoroughly, and it was their prerogative to not put that within this bill draft, and Senator Grew was there, and he can maybe speak, and Chairman Salazar was there to, kind of defend the Management Council's position on that. But in reality, your decision to either modify the basket of goods should really come before you even recalibrate, because you may not even modify or make an amendment to your basket of goods, even as part of the recalibration effort. And so doing those in tandem is quite difficult, because you may adopt, as a committee, recommendations to modify your basket of goods, but those may not ultimately be enacted into law. And if you have a recommendation on costs that presumes changes in your basket of goods, and if those basket of good changes don't get enacted in law, your model may not necessarily reflect cost. And so that discussion about basket of goods probably should have been discussed last year in terms of, hey, should we pull the hood up on the basket of goods? And then you have your review of what that cost should be. Not saying that it can't happen tandemly, but it is very difficult, and the 12 days would have to be multiplied by an unknown number, and the cost certainly would increase for that purpose.
Let me ask you this, man. If there was an interest to talk about the basket of goods this summer, this committee would have to appropriate additional funds, would we not, to cover the cost of that? And then the second question is, under this bill of recalibration, does it have to be explicitly put in there that one of the objectives is the basket of goods, or could the committee during the process go into the issue of basket of goods? Just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't know that you necessarily need that within this legislation, but you may have to appropriate additional funds for that purpose. The amount we put in here was certainly based upon historical recalibration efforts with an inflationary factor, and the scope of work is only certainly focused on the costing of the current basket of goods. Nothing precludes the committee from reviewing the basket of goods, and that's something that we actually do at the beginning of the process, is inform the committee on really what your purpose, what your charge is, and really what that, we go into the history of how the basket of goods was developed back in 1997, what changes have been made, which were only once in 2017. I would also offer that while 21.9, 101, and 102 set the common core of skills and knowledge that school districts are required to deliver in 2005 and 6 when the Hathaway Scholarship Program was developed, that is also an additional layer of the basket of goods that is required to be delivered by school districts. So it's not just a single section of law that school districts have to adhere to on their basket of goods, but the Hathaway Scholarship Program and what we call the success curriculum is another layer of the basket of goods that our consultants review and cost out as part of this review.
Second, any discussion? Roll call.
Roll call vote on House Bill 316, engrossed. Senator Driscoll. Aye. Senator Guru. Aye. Senator Larson. Aye. Senator Smith. No. And Chairman Salzar. Aye. Mr. Chairman, 4 ayes, 1 no, do pass.
Next bill is
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Darren Westby, Wyoming Department of Transportation. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about House Bill 33. Not sure how deep you want to go or how little deep you want to go. I want to make sure that I give you the information you need to help you make your decision. Okay.
if you can just give us a real 30,000 feet and then talk specifically about the fiscal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really high level, the bill is to take the stateside portion of the sales tax on vehicles and redirect them from the general fund to the highway fund. We were very specific in the interim conversation to only look at the stateside portion. We did not want to get into the local distributions that happen. At the time, it was 70%, 30%, 70% was coming to the state, 30% was coming or going to the locals. I think Senate File 60 that went through your House dropped it from 70 to 65. And so that drops the fiscal note that you see presented. I think the fiscal note that you see presented is 69 million impact per year to the highway fund. That obviously drops down, doing quick math in my head, somewhere around probably 62 to 64 million-ish in that range. And so that's kind of the high level about the bill. The fiscal note itself, or discussion about the why behind it a little bit. Over the interim, we did get a topic with the Transportation Committee, and one of them was highway funding. What is our highway funding and what can we do to improve it? And so throughout that, LSO did a great job researching all of our surrounding states and other states as to what revenues come in for the transportation system, and phenomenal job of research. We've done our own as well, and it was corroborated throughout the interim. The hard part when you start comparing states to states is every state has a different tax impact on things. Every state has a different way to fund a road, so trying to compare them, but what it did come back with was a lot of concept of ideas of what we could go after, and the committee worked them pretty hard, and the two that came out of committee were the severance tax, the statutory side severance tax distribution. Instead of it going to, I think 50% went to PMTF, 50% went to Common Schools Trust. Those would go to the highway fund. That got defeated in committee once we got to the legislature. The second one was the bill that you see in front of you today on the sales tax on vehicle distribution. From a need, Mr. Chairman, I know you talked to me a little bit before this meeting about the need. The agency back in 2019 did a study on our mission and the funding to perform the mission at that level, and it came out significant. I told you the number 400 million is what per year. That's not a biennial number. That's a per year number to perform our mission at the level of service that is requested by our people. In that need is not just roads. A very large percentage of it is the roads, but we have equipment, we have facilities, we have aeronautics, we have public safety communications, all those things kind of wrapped into that $400 million number. The one thing as we were going through analyzing our funding streams over the last 20 years, our stateside funding, and stateside and federal, right? That's how we operate. Federal, on the roads itself, we're 70% funded by the federal government. All the income taxes that you pay, all the fuel tax that goes back to the DC, that comes back in the formula side of the house that we utilize, and we're 70% funded with federal dollars. The 30% is the stateside funding. Over the last 20 years, our stateside funding has been flat. No increases, well, we see an increase in fuel tax, we see a decrease in general fund, we see an increase in registration fees, we see a decrease in other stateside funds, whether general fund or AML funds or whatever was being used back in the day. And so for the last 20 years, our stateside revenue has been flat. All the while, cost of doing business has gone up. Our buying power has gone down. Our amount of roads that we can maintain just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so this year's interim study is probably no different than every other request that my predecessors has made in the past. We're getting to that point. We need to do something. We're in the position where we know we have known improvements that we need to make, whether it's for capacity or safety. A lot of those projects, 287 South Laramie to the border, 59 north out of Douglas, 2026 from Casper to Shoshone, down in the southwest, Highway 30 from the interstate to the Idaho border, just to name a few. There's also some resiliency projects through the canyon going up through the Wind Rivers. There's all those projects that we all know that we need and want to do, but don't have the funding to do them. But parlay that into the day-to-day ongoing operations. I cannot use federal dollars to maintain the roads. Snow plowing, pothole repair, fence, delineators, manpower, that's about 75% can't be used from the federal dollar. So as our buying power has gone down, the amount of roads that we can maintain just continues to dwindle. And the other thing that I'm really concerned about, probably more so than most, is the federal formula dollars that we come back, that's coming up for reauthorization in another year and a half, 2 years. My concern is the federal dollar going to go down? And if we don't shore up the state side, we're going to start going backwards in a really fast hurry. And so trying to push on the state side funding significantly, Mr. Chairman, and for
So
that.
with the committee's indulgence, I have a couple questions here. So first of all, we're looking at 62 to 64 million biennium
Per year,
per year.
correct,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
And you're talking that this additional revenue to you will go to road projects?
Mr. Chairman, it can go to road projects. We have more needs than just roads.
No, but road projects, correct? Some will go to road projects.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, absolutely.
Equipment? New equipment that you'll need to do this?
Yes, sir.
Does it have anything to do with snow plowing in the winter?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. It
Okay.
would go towards operations.
Okay. Will this go to increased costs of employees?
Mr. Chairman, it should not go to increased cost of employees. Now, every time the state as a whole improves the hourly wage or whatever we do for compensation, we choose to match that along with all the other state employees. When that happens, we're another funded agency, so every time that happens, we're very gratefully able to increase our ability to maintain our employees. So we do that, but it's at the cost of X.
And then I know that there are a number of spots in the state who are having challenges, particularly with snow plowing, like Jeffrey City. This additional revenue will help you in those spots?
Mr. Chairman, it gives us the opportunity to potentially find more opportunities, say housing. If that
Okay.
housing's an issue, we could potentially utilize some of these funds to get housing up there so we can recruit somebody to go work in some of these more remote locations.
So you could say that if this were to pass, areas throughout the state would be helped, including those areas like Jeffrey City where there's a housing issue. I'm sure it's other places too, but this would go to that.
Mr. Chairman, it can, absolutely. I don't want to shoehorn that a certain percentage will go towards
Right.
snow plows.
I'm not
certain
asking for that.
percentage, Right,
No.
but absolutely, the most flexibility that we can have in stateside funding gives us the most flexibility to perfect our mission at the level of service that you all require.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I'll kind of string a few questions at you so I don't have to run back and forth with you. It's all right, Mr. Chairman. First would be fuel tax dollars. What have they done over the last 20 years or so? Kind of lead into what electric vehicles are doing, because I think it's somewhat of a justification on this. If they're not going to pay road tax, maybe you guys ought to be getting some of the registration or all of it. The other one's a winger that's way out there is update on the tunnel and what the potential costs are to get that thing back up and going. And are the feds going to step up and pay a good chunk of that, or is that going to be on us? Because last I knew, 7,000 trucks a day, and it gets pretty hard on the roads through Green River. You may have some pretty good costs rebuilding roads if we can't figure it out. So if you'd enlighten us just a little on what we might be looking at in the future. And I guess on the last, we've still got a little problem at Teton Pass that's got to be made permanent. What are we looking at on potential long-term costs there, and where does the money come from?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, if I could, I'll go in backwards order. Teton Pass, we're very fortunate to get emergency relief funding through the USDOT, and we were fortunate enough to utilize, since those funds would be coming from the IIJA pot of money, that we're able to use the governor's match to help offset the matching component that is required even through the emergency relief funding. So from an agency perspective, we're almost made whole on pretty much everything on Teton Pass. Very grateful for the opportunity with those governor's matching funds, so we didn't have to go take a few more projects off the STIP to make that whole. So from a pass perspective, we're probably 60-ish, 65% complete on the rebuild of the reconstruction part of the project. The detour seems to be working well. I'd probably lean towards Senator Grew if he wants to parlay onto that. But the detour's open, and we have people stationed up there around the clock to ensure that that 11% detour is maintained properly. On going into the tunnels, it's still pretty raw with not just exec staff that has dealt with it, but all the people that have dealt with it over the weekend. There were 3 fatalities, and after seeing some of the video and some of the investigation conversation, we can all thank somebody very much above our heads for only being 3. There was 26 vehicles involved in that, 16 commercial vehicles, 10 personal, private, just cars, trucks, and out of those 16 commercial vehicles, 6 of them completely gone. Out of the passenger cars, 2 of them are completely gone. So the heat in there was significant. From a grace of God, we only had 3 fatalities. And I think as the week progresses and as some of the investigation comes out, we won't be releasing any names of the heroes. That'll have to come out somewhere else. But there's going to be a long list of people that can attribute a lot of lives saved, whether it be the people that were actively involved in the crash or the first responders that got there so quickly and worked so hard to try to save people's lives. And so I know them for the longest time. The fire chief out there that was working that, he was heartsick that they had to pull out. Well, the heat was so intense in that tunnel that the concrete liner, you think about concrete and steel, they have a different expansion rate. Well, when you get that much heat in there, the concrete expands differently than the steel, and the spalling of the concrete was coming down on the first responder, the heads. And so they had to unfortunately pull out for their own safety. It's not what they wanted to do, for sure. They wanted to stay in there and battle, but for their own safety, they had to pull out. It was, I tell them, I've said it several times this week, but I don't know how else to say it, but how a community and a state pulled together for another crisis. We can all be proud to live in the state. The local government there, the county commission, the local Green River and Rock Springs communities really rallied, supported us, we supported them. You're right, we have 9,000 cars per day going on I-80 each way. So that's 9,000 going east and 9,000 going west. So that little town of Green River is getting inundated, which expedited our crew on YDOT to try to get that eastbound lane set up in a head-to-head configuration so we can get that traffic out of there. And so we sidestepped several emergency contracting rules to make that contracting happen. And we got DiBernardi there in Southwest Wyoming on board and S&L Industries on board to get in there and find us enough concrete barricades to get that set up in that head-to-head configuration. And they hopefully, they're saying tomorrow, They're hoping sooner, but they're saying tomorrow they should have that traffic out of Green River. And obviously to a much decreased speed limit, because it's never good to go head to head on an interstate, let alone in a tunnel. And so trying to keep safety to a level that needs to be, and really proud of not only my crew, but all the crews that we've been working with. DCI came and was helping with the investigation. They brought their technology that helped expedite the investigation. We have NTSB show up on site, so they're running kind of a parallel investigation out there. So, but I think where you're going, thank you for the latitude on that. I wanted to get that out to you guys, that we can all be proud to be Wyoming citizens. And but from a funding perspective right now, we're sitting at probably 250,000, what we're looking at right now, just to get the detour in place. Once we get the detour in place, the team will shift. I got structural engineers working with some other consultants to be able to get into the tunnel. We got to get it washed. It's so sooted right now that we can't see what we need to see to do a full investigation and analysis of the structural part of it. And when I say structural, the tunnel itself was bored through pretty much solid rock. So the tunnel itself is secure. It's not in imminent danger of collapse. What has failed is the concrete liner. I call it the pretty, right? The veneer that kind of keeps some of the friable rock from falling down. It's a good encapsulating material. Does it add some structural? Some. But for the most part, the bridging of the stone is what's the structure. And so that's going to take the longest time to analyze. Do we have to just tear it all down and start back over? Or can we patch it in place? Or is there short-term, medium-term, long-term solutions? And the costs are unknown at this point. As for the federal assistance, we're still in the process of working with the Federal Highway and USDOT, because it is somewhat man-made crisis. We're not sure where they're at with that. There's a lot of insurance companies that are going to be involved, and this is going to be a long, drawn-out process to figure this out. And so I'm not too sure where the Federal Highway is going to land on it right now, but we're actively working with them and the USDOT to see what is within their offer. I know for a fact that if it comes that they can play in this, that they will be there for it, for sure. Going on to fuel tax. Fuel tax has been pretty flat for the last 20 years. I'd say that the consumption has gone down as efficiency of vehicles has gone up. The advent of electric vehicles hasn't helped the sale per gallon of fuel. But as a nation as a whole, it's definitely gone down. That's our biggest concern with where we get the federal formula dollars is from the National Highway Trust, and the National Highway Trust is funded by fuel tax. And as fuel tax on the national level keeps going down, the amount of money that they used to be solvent, where the amount of fuel tax come in just goes out into a formula to all the states, there's been a delta, the amount of fuel tax versus the need for all the states in the formula. That delta is what scares me. So they end up backfilling that with probably federal general funds, so to speak. I don't know how long the feds are going to continue to do that. So the impetus on getting stateside funding shored up now, while we are seeing the federal dollar where it's at, formula dollar coming to WYDOT, I should say, or coming to Wyoming, is where we're at. So from a stateside fuel tax, we haven't seen a significant decrease. It's flat, albeit we know that there's a lot more people driving the roads. We're about 25.3 billion. She's got the number. There's over 25 million miles driven a day in Wyoming. That's 9.3 billion miles a year. It's a lot of roads to maintain. We got 7,000 roads, 2,000 bridges, to try to spread as much as we can across to keep the level of service that is required. So, Mr. Chairman and Senator Driscoll, thank you for those questions. Hopefully I answered them. If you have any follow-up, I'd try to ask my brain trust here.
Senator Driscoll.
Just one, crazy things come in threes, what's next for you?
I'm sorry.
Crazy things come in threes, what's next for you? We've got Teton Pass, and we've got a tunnel, are you gonna do something with airplanes or water next?
Mr. Chairman, I'm hoping not. I'm asking my team to go out and see if there's anything smaller that we can attribute and say we're done with the three. But, right.
So let me ask you this, this is a significant amount of money shift here. What do you expect you will be able to do now that you haven't been able to do if this money starts rolling into your department?
Mr. Chairman, it's a great question. We work on this on an hourly basis, trying to figure out the what ifs and how can we shift and what can we do. The big thing we'd like to do is get out of preservation only mode right now. We've just been spreading that peanut butter as thin as we can to all the roads. We need to shift that focus. We don't have enough to do that anymore. So we're gonna have to shift that focus down to just maintain and keep roads at a level of service on the national highway system, the roads that are probably getting the highest average daily traffic volumes. Some of our smaller stateside roads might not get that love. And so what this would do is help us to ensure that we can maintain a level of service on all the roads as much as we can. The other thing is our facilities, when we went into preservation only mode, we let our facilities go at a lower priority, which means our facilities are in not great shape. Some of our facilities can't even house the equipment that we have today. So a lot of our snow plows are sitting outside. That's a concern to me from a mission perspective. If there's a snowstorm and our vehicles don't start because they've been sitting outside, what does that do to our mission and how do we perform it? Equipment is another thing. I think we've been systematically, we got to a point where our equipment was so old and so bad that we had to make that a priority. So we took some of that off the roads and started getting our equipment where it needs to be. So we're in a decent place, not a great place, a decent place on equipment. But it gives us the opportunity to also, from a business perspective, make the right decision on a surface treatment. So when you start thinking about I-80, when we started getting into the preservation only mode, when we started having problems, we would go with an asphalt overlay, or we'd mill up and we'd go over it with asphalt. When we do a reconstruction on a road, we would probably just go back with asphalt. Well, asphalt lasts about 7 years until you have to touch it again. Well, if we went with concrete, that would have been 20, 21 years. So every 7 years, we're back impacting the traffic on that highway or that road.
So with this additional revenue, you're not just maintaining, you're permanently fixing roads.
Mr. Chairman, once we get to the level that we have the funding that we truly want, we'll definitely make those better business decisions on that. But yes, permanently fixing would be great. Adding some capacity would be nice too. Right now, the agency has been, like I said, in a preservation only mode, which means that we're not adding new capacity to our system. Why would I add more capacity if I can't maintain what I got?
So I'm going to ask one thing of you. If this does pass out of committee today, can you send this committee a one-page summary of your testimony today so that we can adequately defend it on the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to. I'll condense my 14 pages to something a little more probably congenial that would help you all.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you, appreciate it. Other testimony?
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kelly Little, and I represent the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. AGC of Wyoming's members are the ones who build, maintain, and repair our roads, bridges, and highways, and they understand better than anybody the condition that our roads are in. Revenue spent on maintaining and improving Wyoming's road system is an investment in Wyoming's future. Just like investing in the financial sector, investing in infrastructure is a prudent decision as it brings a positive return on investment. I did want to give a quick example to the committee. If you live here in Laramie County and you go to a dealer and you buy a brand new passenger vehicle for $50,000. You go to the courthouse to license and pay your tax on that vehicle. You're going to pay a 6% sales tax, so that's $3,000. $2,000 of that sales tax is going to go to the state general fund. That's the state 4%. $1,000 is going to go to the local government's general purpose and specific purpose taxes, the 5th and 6th penny. You're going to pay a $900 county registration fee. That's dispersed like property tax. So it's going to go to schools, it's going to go to counties, cities and towns, and special districts. And then you're going to pay a state registration fee, which is $30. That goes to YDOT. So for a grand total payment of $3,930, only $30 of that total, 0.7%, less than 1% of that total goes directly to maintenance and improvement of the infrastructure that vehicle is going to be used on. A tax that has a direct nexus to the use of the revenue is a just and fair tax. I would argue that vehicle sales tax revenue going to the general fund, of which YDOT was taken off of in the past decade, is not a direct nexus and fair use of the tax. This bill rectifies that. Wyoming motorists travel 9.32 billion miles per year, and traffic accidents in Wyoming imposed a total of $889 million in economic costs in 2023. Investing in our transportation system is an imperative matter of public safety. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kelly, question. This is maybe, from what we've heard, a quarter of the fix that we need. Where do you see this going from here? I mean, from your perspective and, as representing the builders of roads, where do you see us, where should we be looking? I mean, this is like I say, this is a Band-Aid on top of a big wound. So where do you see it going? Are you going to stand with us when we say we're going to have to increase the fuel tax which is going to directly impact your folks too, or are we going to be on opposite sides on that? How do you see this playing out?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, I would say, in the past, AGC of Wyoming has always been supportive of increased funding to YDOT. We obviously know what the condition of the roads are. I think, in these times, it's going to take creative solutions. As Director Westby mentioned, over the interim, they did a study. They looked at different states. How are their roads funded? There's lots of ideas out there. If they're implementable in Wyoming, we're not sure. But that's something, I think that this is a start. This is something to get us started. And then that kind of buys us time to find that creative solution down the road. So that is what I would say is this is a start and a way for us to have some time to get there.
I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Robert Short, Commerce County Commissioner, and I was not going to speak until the good senator mentioned about increased fuel tax. As a contractor in Wyoming with more than 100 vehicles that I personally was responsible for the expenses associated with operating on our roads, it was a very large fuel bill that I managed to stomach year after year, more than $400,000 a year in fuel. However, without roadways for me to travel to and from those job sites, I have no business. And I would posit that this roadway discussion is literally the lifeline of the economics of our state, especially given the fact that we rely so much on tourism. So I would encourage the committee to pass this into the floor for discussion, even though it might cost me more in fuel tax ultimately. I think the net benefit would be very positive for myself and the others in our state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just a comment. Thank you for that. I want you to know how much I appreciate it, because as the good chairman said, we're going to have to take this to the floor and defend it and try to get it passed. And that's going to be the next question that comes. It's like, okay, this is a piece of the puzzle. What are the other pieces? So that's why I was asking. And I know the Association of General Contractors has always been with us and helped us to try to find creative solutions. I expect they will in the future. And I appreciate your comments as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Second, is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I really, I think highly of the director of the Department of Transportation. In fact, I love his name, so this is not personal. But I do think that this is a supplemental budget year. This is for emergencies, and I would, if you had a little more specificity to this, you need more snowplows, you need more buildings to house snowplows, even an idea to, the electric vehicles are propagating so fast that we need a bigger budget, and in terms of what's sold as an electric vehicle, as diverting that to highway maintenance. But I believe this is for emergencies, and I don't think this rises to the level of emergency for me. And so I'll be against this. And I just, that's it. By the way, it's not personal. There's lots of things that we need to expend money on. We need property tax relief, lots of things. So with that, that's my thoughts on it.
With the committee's indulgence, I'd like to take a 5-minute break.
No problem. Standing.
on the bill? Any other
I
discussion?
have one question. Was this a committee bill? Yeah. Okay, I just want to check, because we were talking about being a deal on the interim, and Mr. Chairman, a little bit of indulgence. Committee bills are much different than individual bills coming. I looked at, assumed it was one. But when we talk about it being an emergency and a supplement, it obviously went through an interim, and it's been talked about in depth. This is not something that showed up the first day of session. Thank you.
Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this is a tough one. I'm in favor of this for now, but I also, then why I was asking the questions, this is part of a bigger discussion. And we're just here today to talk about the appropriation that the committee, the good committee, back on transportation, worked on. It's going to take a lot more than that. And I know the reluctance in some minds, and it's going to be on the floor too, is that unless they see a global solution, this is such a big hit to the general fund that it's going to be a tough go for them. And so I certainly understand and respect that. And I think that that's why we're really going to need some help getting this explained on our floor. And so, like I say, the reluctance or the nervousness that you're hearing here is going to be multiplied when it gets out there. So we're going to need your help all the way on this. We're going to have a shot. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, one request maybe on that, it'd be you talked back 20 years, is to look at your income 20 years ago, your vehicle cost 20 years ago. Just pick out a rough snowplow truck for me, or a tractor, and a cost of a mile of pavement, and compare it to today. Look at your income both ways, because I'm one of the ones, I have no problem voting for this. I'm going to tell you, we voted $30 million on an education voucher bill this morning. We put $70 million into fire deal. Roads is one thing that every taxpayer in the state of Wyoming uses in some fashion, whether it's to bring your food to you, to get your kids to school, to do whatever. And I'm one of the ones that's watched over my lifetime I'm one of the ones I voted for tolling I-80. I start looking at the impacts on it, and I truly believe if we want our state to go forward, that it's incredibly important that you guys are funded at least partially. With a $400 million shortfall, and we realize what you guys all do, you can obviously get by with less than 400. But I don't think the path's sustainable going forward. So what are we going to do to deal with inflation? And that's bit of a speech here. That's what we're all dealing with, is inflation has hit every local government, state government, and individual. And all of a sudden, there's not enough money to go around, and taxes have increased because of values. We've got to figure out where we're going to come up with funding to have ourselves go forward, or we go backwards. And not an advocate for crazy new taxes, but I also want a state that's a livable state. And so I, for one, will, assuming you can load us up with good enough information, this is not a optional service, it's an essential service. And most of the spending we're voting on in this legislature is optional spending. Almost all of it's stuff that we choose to take dollars out of the general fund and spend. And to me, this is somewhat non-optional. It's, if you want to keep going, I happen to live in a rural area. I want to be able to get my cattle to town, and I want to be able to get my family to the hospital when it's time, without ruining tires or having gravel roads. So I thank you guys, and I'm pretty highly impressed that you've got by on 20 years of no real increases. I don't know another business in the state that's been around 20 years that can say they're living on the same budget they did 20 years ago.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Smith.
I'll just say that I view this as something that is not for the supplemental budget. It's by any budget. And I'll tell you, it's like Christmas. I've got 5 kids. It comes every year. I know it's coming. I know those expenses are coming. I know that school comes every fall. I know those expenses are coming, and I budget for that. And it's just a blank check. And I realize that you guys are underfunded. And that's something that needs to be addressed in the biennium for me. That's how I'll vote. And I'll be consistent with you. And I guarantee you'll like me over time.
One more, Mr. Chairman, if I can. And not necessarily tit for tat. The budget's supplemental. As far as bills go for the session, it is not an emergency session. This is a session that we do business every year in the exact same fashion. The budget is treated, and I don't necessarily agree with it as an emergency budget. Never has been. It's really been, in my opinion, the years I've been here, we used the budget to cut in times that were short and times to allocate excess money when we had excess money. It's not always been an emergency, but as far as bills go, from my end, it's business as usual every year. Whatever bills can get through, they're what comes, and this is a good one.
Okay, I'll simply say this. I will vote to get this to the floor. This is a major, I think, in my opinion, a major policy shift and expenditure. I'm not saying I oppose it. I'm just simply saying it is a shift. And I will also say that I reserve the right to alter my vote on the floor. But I think it should go to the floor. It should go to the full Senate. Other discussion, Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll be a no vote. I just have problems with it coming this way. Wasn't very long ago, we got YDOT off the general fund. And I think it was kind of a fight to get, or I thought it was coming from YDOT. But, so I got issues with it. I'd almost rather I hate to say it, pick what the project's gonna be, and I know what that fight would be, but having it go strictly to new highways, I think would be or rebuild highways or whatever would be more preferable to me.
Roll call vote on House Bill 33. Senator Driscoll? Aye. Senator Guru? Aye. Senator Larson? No. Senator Smith? No. And Chairman Salzar? Mr. Chairman, 3 ayes and 2 noes do pass.
Thank you. And Director, you'll get us